Warning, we are not your attorneys. Please, don't take anything we say as legal advice. I'm Geoff.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Derrick.
And you are listening to the Not So Grand Jury,
which is now sponsored by Morwa P. LLC. Well, greetings, guys. I'm coming to you from America's Playground, Las Vegas, so I'm going to apologize both to you and to the listener if my audio absolutely blows, because I'm coming to you from the Park MGM hotel room where there's just something loud in the air conditioning that I can't do anything about. So...
that sounds like one of those we don't want people to stay in their hotel rooms kind of things.
I mean, I love the hotel room, but it's not great for podcasting, believe it or not. So, also, I'm about 5 gin and tonics in, so this will be fun.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not sure if you expected otherwise, but here we go.
It's, do what you gotta do.
Yeah.
What are you doing in Vegas?
Vegasing.
Okay, have fun.
Mostly a few table games, a little poker, enjoying myself.
I wasn't sure if it was a work trip.
Oh, I mean, we can call it a work trip. I mean, I'm podcasting. It's a work trip.
That's true. All right.
Yeah. But no, definitely not a work trip. All right, Mike, take it away.
This week we're doing an episode based on 2 episodes from The X-Files, Squeeze and Tooms. It follows one of the few recurring monsters of the week in The X-Files, Eugene Victor Tooms, who is, as we discover in the first episode, a mutant who wakes up once every 30 years to eat 5 people's livers.
And for those of you who, clicked on the episode without actually seeing the notes, it's Season 1, Episodes 3 and 21 of The X-Files, which
Thank you.
Also happen to be the only 2 episodes that I know of from Season 1 that I've ever watched. But here we are. So,
The X-Files themselves, a famous show, mostly dealt with aliens and other supernatural things. These episodes happen to have him follow a serial killer who, for unexplained reasons, is a mutant who can live for decades without aging and also has a need to crawl through tight spaces and eat other human beings' livers.
I think he has. I'm not sure he has the need to crawl through tight spaces. He has the ability to deform his body.
It seemed like a compulsion because, at the end of the first episode, he's just eyeing up a tiny little hole. That's
okay. Fair enough.
There's significant character moments where it just gets quiet and he's looking at I can slide through that little space. So through this, we're hoping to evaluate a few legal topics, mostly polygraph tests, insanity defenses, possibly parole boards, and we'll see what else we get to. Just a brief synopsis. The first episode starts with actually, this is taking a step back. How many other X-File episodes have you guys watched? Geoff has watched most of them. Derrick, maybe 2 of them.
So I've probably watched 20 over the years, but I couldn't tell you what season, where they are. And in fact, Squeeze, which is our first episode here, is the only one I recall actually watching. So you can give me as much or as little as you want.
I started doing a rewatch with my girlfriend, and we've noticed where the episodes take place. And sometimes they try to keep it on the Amtrak Beltway, where it's, in theory they're in D.C., so they pop to Philadelphia sometimes or Baltimore other times. So this episode takes place in Baltimore. Yeah. And it opens with a mysterious killing in an office. A character, is in their office, the door suddenly slams shut, you hear a struggle, and later we find out somebody died in there and no one can figure out how they got in. One of the first interactions we see in the episode is Dana Scully interacting with one of her FBI colleagues who's trying to recruit her to help out on a case, but also dealing with making fun of her, I guess, for dealing with Spooky Mulder, which is the most realistic thing that happens in the show is everyone thinking Mulder is a crazy person.
Do we need to provide any background on the main characters of the show? Is that in the zeitgeist enough that Scully's the skeptic, Mulder's the believer?
We probably should, because the show came out 30 years ago.
So how are you doing? Have you had any close encounters of the third kind?
Is that what everyone thinks I do?
No, of course not. But you do work with Spooky Mulder.
Mulder's ideas may be a bit out there, but he is a great agent.
Yeah, well, I've got this case that's out there. Baltimore PD calls. They want our help on a serial killer profile. 3 murders began 6 weeks ago. Victims vary in age, race, gender, no known connections to each other.
I take it there's a pattern.
Point of entry. Actually, the lack of one.
What do you mean?
One victim, college girl, killed in her 10 by 12 cinder block dorm room. She was found with the windows locked and the door chained from the inside. The last incident, 2 days ago. High security office building. Nothing on the security monitors. Janitor spoke to the victim minutes before the murder. Didn't hear or see a thing out of the ordinary.
Suicides?
Each victim was found with their liver ripped out. No cutting tool was used.
Bare hands? This looks like an X-file.
Let's not get carried away. I'm gonna solve these murders, but what I would like from you is to go over the case histories. Maybe come down to the crime scene.
Do you want me to ask Mulder?
Okay, if he wants to come and do you a favor, great. But make sure he knows this is my case. Dana, if I can break a case like this one, I'll be getting my bump up the ladder. And you, maybe you won't have to be Mrs. Spooky anymore.
So Dana Scully is supposed to be the skeptical character. Fox Mulder is supposed to be the male lead who's also believes in aliens and all sorts of supernatural things. And together they have a special section of the FBI where they study the X-Files, which are crazy events that can't be explained through normal crimes. What else should I mention? So the colleague that's trying to recruit Dana to help investigate this murder, he's a young up-and-coming agent who's gunning for a higher spot, and that's a little bit of the dynamic that happens this episode where he's trying to move up. At the same time, he thinks Mulder is just a lunatic.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, as someone who hasn't watched that much X-Files, I think it's pretty obvious that a good the B plot is that other guy what's his name? Tom, I forget what Colton.
Yeah,
Colton.
Literally Tom Colton.
Tom Colton. Tom Colton is just like a dick. Is literally what this sort of the B plot is that he has he does not think that what Mulder does is at all, I don't know, even legitimate. I think he just believes that the X-Files is just where you go for your career to die, and they just don't want to fire you. At least that's what I sort of got out of it.
Yeah.
Does that change over the years? Later in the later seasons of the X-Files?
No, he's always kind of viewed as a crazy person, I think.
Okay.
We're only on season 2 right now, though.
Got it. Okay.
My rewatch.
Fair enough.
Colton, by the way, played by the great Donald Logue from, I believe, Gotham, as well as going a ways back, Blade. I've always been a bit of a fan of his. I hope it's him. It looks a lot like him.
So Mulder immediately recognizes that this match... By the way, a random trope that happens in this movie is anytime something crazy happens, Mulder has a file on it. Where it's oh yeah, somebody eating livers in Baltimore? Yeah, we have a couple of those that match this. They happen once every 30 years.
It's very Warehouse 13. Why am I citing a more niche show to?
Yeah, never seen that. Now, historically, the FBI does get involved in a lot of serial killer incidents. Usually, it's because they might be crossing into other jurisdictions. The serial killer may be operating. They're not just operating in Baltimore, but they might be operating in Virginia. In which case, it'd be easier for the FBI to handle that than to have the Virginia State Police and the Baltimore City Police cooperate.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, the two big things where the FBI gets involved are federal crimes and cross-border crimes, right? Those are really the two big things.
Specifically, the reason the FBI was created because bank robbers would rob a bank and then cross state lines. And it was just easier to have the FBI handle all of those.
Right.
So in a way, it makes sense for this to happen, for them to get involved. In a way, it does not, because why would, if all of these murders take place in Baltimore, it should just be the Baltimore police. Now, maybe the Baltimore police would call in the FBI if this is an unusual murder, if there's, a serial killer, because they just don't have the manpower or the expertise to handle something like this. So it could happen.
But actually, we never actually see a police officer, do we?
No, we never see the Baltimore. We do actually. The retired man.
That's true.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the time that we interact with the Baltimore police. Is a retired police officer. We'll get to him shortly.
It still doesn't explain what he was doing there that late at night.
So he's one of the few civil servants we have with initiative, and we busted him for it.
He was crawling up an air duct by himself without alerting security.
Dana, he passed the test. His story checks out. He's not the guy. It doesn't mean that your profile's incorrect.
Scully's right. It is the guy.
What do you got, Mulder?
He lied on questions 11 and 13. His electrodermal and cardiographic response nearly go off the chart.
Is number 11 the 100-year-old question? Well, let me tell you, I had a reaction to that stupid question. And what the hell is this Powhatan Mill thing?
2 murders with matching MOs occurred in Powhatan Mill in 1933. Just look at the chart.
My interpretation of those reactions...
I don't need you or that machine telling me if Tooms was alive in 33.
He's the guy.
I'm letting him go.
So we never actually see the Baltimore law enforcement of this. So they go to investigate the crime, and I think at that point is when they encounter Tooms, and he's suspiciously in a crawl space.
Yeah.
Am I remembering this correctly?
He emerges from the ductwork in a maintenance uniform.
And then they bring him back to, I think we're supposed to assume that that's the field office that they go to, and he's given a polygraph test, which they ask him a bunch of standard questions, and then Mulder slips in a few random questions about, were you killing people 30 years ago? Are you 100 years old? And those are the ones that the polygraph goes nuts on.
Mm-hmm. Well, according to Mulder, they go nuts. Yeah. According to the person after actually giving the test, they don't mean anything. Which
do you want to
Yeah, so if you want me to sort of jump into polygraph tests, so that was the fun part I got to talk about. Just to sort of briefly get into, I think everyone's familiar with lie detector or polygraph tests. I believe they really became the first ever polygraph test came out in the 20s, 1920s, give or take, and was immediately within 2 years rejected for use in the courts by the Fry versus U.S. Supreme Court case, where they basically held that expert testimony is only admissible if it's based on scientific methods that are generally accepted and well established. Shockingly enough, a science that had just come out a few years before was not considered to meet that standard. And then flash forward 70 years later, and we see in this episode, because this was a 1993 episode, we see them using the polygraph test. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that you can't use it. We are fully aware that there are still private companies and government entities that use polygraphs as part of whether the employment process. I know FBI agents have to go through a polygraph. And in fact, if they fail, I think they're automatically disqualified to be agents. So it is still a very important part of certain aspects, but not in the sort of courtroom space. But it is certainly, they are used out there. There is, let's just say, it is highly questionable as to whether they are legitimate or not.
Yeah, I was going to say you should put science in some pretty significant air quotes.
Just to expand on that, you can find instructions online about how to fool a polygraph test, what you could personally do to trigger it or to not trigger it.
In fact, I believe there are more YouTube clips about beating a polygraph test than actually how to administer a polygraph test.
I think there's even Mythbusters about.
Now, the tach will stimulate your EKG much in the same way a lie would. But you have to step on it during the control questions. Name, birth date, so on. So that those levels will match the stress level of your false answers.
Got it. How much is this going to hurt?
If you're doing it right, it should be pretty excruciating.
Is your birth date February 11th, 1965?
Yes.
Are you wearing a white shirt?
Yes.
Have you ever been involved in the commission of a crime?
No.
Have you ever defrauded or attempted to defraud the gaming industry?
No.
Alex?
Solid.
I love technology. Because to look at you, I'd swear you were being evasive, but the machine says you're clean.
I'm just a little nervous. I really want this job.
You can relax now. Welcome to Shuffle Royale.
Yes, there's a Mythbusters episode about it. I think it's a common trope in movies that you can easily beat it. And what's funny is that's usually the most believable thing in the movies. Like, you know, Ocean's 13, they have Livingston beat the polygraph in order to work for some shuffle machine company, and he is like dripping sweat because he's putting his his big toe through like some type of little needle prick that like makes it so that stresses him on the standard test, so that when he's lying the stress is the same. Whatever. Long story short, I don't think anyone believes that polygraphs actually are, you know, consistently helpful in any way.
No. People do believe that. They're just wrong.
Oh, okay.
Like, you'll occasionally see people say, like, you know, you'll have someone say a crazy statement in public and be like, and I'll take a lie detector test to prove it. Rudy Giuliani will say something like that. Like, oh, I can prove it, and I'll take a lie detector test.
Right. And it's simply because it doesn't really matter what comes out. Like, if you pass it, then you're claiming that, see, I was telling the truth. If you don't pass it, you're like, well, it's the test. Like, that's literally what it is. What's really interesting here is, and I'm still not sure I fully understand what the point they were trying to get to is, like, so Mulder has, like, inserts these two questions, one about being over 100 years old and one about committing a murder in like 1933 or something,
1966 or something.
Yeah, it was either 30 years ago or 60 years ago. I forget which one.
Yeah.
But the person administering the polygraph doesn't even acknowledge that there's an issue. Like, she basically says right afterwards, I'd give him an A+, he passes, there's no issue. And then Mulder's like, well, this little line was higher on both of them. And I don't know what that means. Like, the fact that, like, the person administering the polygraph test did not think it was a fail, and he said that he failed the two questions, I don't buy it.
Well, he's a skeptic, so he automatically... No, it's bad writing.
If you are someone who finds polygraphs to be credible, an aspect that would not be good is having someone else who's not the person administering the polygraph jump in and ask random questions. That alone could skew your results if it's a valid thing, which it's not.
Right, because not that I know exactly how to fully administer a polygraph test, but my understanding is you ask the control questions to get the sort of base stress level, and then you ask the other questions, and that you see where the stressors go. I don't know if throwing in a random-ass question, like, what's about those questions that would be any different than when they ask them the question, have you killed a person?
Well, I'm saying having a different person ask the question out of the blue.
Well, but also, like, if he was capable of lying about have you killed someone, but not capable about lying, have you killed someone 60 years ago or something?
Right. I don't, like, it was still a question that he was either truthful or not truthful. Like, the fact that Mulder came up with the questions, I don't think changes anything. I also don't, like, if Mulder thought that, like, there was something in the reading that was different, wouldn't the person administering the polygraph have known there was something different?
Yeah.
I don't understand. I think it's bad writing. I think from, like, you're right. I think actually it would make more sense if he had jumped in to ask the questions. But even then, I don't think it, like, fully gets there. It's still they answered the base questions, and then they got the base, then they asked the other questions. I don't care what the questions are. It's either truthful or not, according to the polygraph. So part of this is polygraphs suck, and part of this is I don't understand how two different people can interpret them two very differently. By the way, apparently Mulder's an expert in polygraphs. So
oh yeah, well, he's the main character, so he's an expert in everything.
He's David Duchovny. How is he not an expert in polygraphs? Right. Yeah. So, from my perspective, that did not add anything to the episode.
Yeah. So, I agree. Polygraphs are generally nonsense, and it's also a trope that comes up in a lot of movies and TV where this is somehow the definitive thing that happens.
Right.
Moving on, so the rest of the FBI agents use this as proof that he's innocent, which also shouldn't be proof that he's innocent, but whatever. Let him go. Mulder is able to use his fingerprints and connect them to fingerprints at other murder crimes 30 and 60 years ago, but he stretches them out and elongates them, which is a little bit weird because he's like digitally distorting them, and it's 1993 that this is happening. So it's a little strange that he's doing that, and also I don't know if that would ever be useful as evidence. I get why it would be incredible if you could show that, but also, if you imagine you're trying to admit that as evidence in a criminal case where it's like his fingerprints match fingerprints at the scene of the crime if I digitally alter them by stretching them out and squeezing them in weird ways.
Well, and that was also interesting is that when he was showing the side by side, like the one from 30 years ago and then the one he elongated, it was like, by the way, pretty impressive program for 1993 that you could just slowly elongate fingerprints, which I wouldn't think any fingerprint software would do because that's not a thing.
But MS Paint probably could, or I
guess. But it's actually impressive that the program, whatever program they were using, was able to he could just stretch out the fingers and be like, oh, it's a perfect match
perfectly. Like on the first try, he's like, got it.
100% match, perfect match, because that's how that would work. So yep, this is all believable, guys. Truly believable.
I guess I'm just stuck on how would you testify to that in court? Like you call Mulder as your witness, and he has to explain that he digitally altered these fingerprints to make them match. It's like the defense attorney's like, yes, okay, so you're admitting you altered the evidence.
In fact, you're admitting the only way to get this to work was by altering the evidence.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Oh, eventually so Mulder has to. Oh, I wish I had recorded the line. There is a line where he describes he's about to look into the microfiche, and he describes how it always makes him sick. But eventually Mulder discovers, there's another detective who worked on this years earlier. They go to talk to him. He described it like it was, discovering the Holocaust happened for the first time.
I've been waiting 25 years for you.
Sir?
I called it quits in 1968 after 45 years as a cop. And those killings at Powhatan Mill. I was a sheriff then, and I'd seen my share of murders. Bloody ones. But I could go home and pitch a few baseballs to my kid and never give it a second thought. You gotta be able to do that. You'd go crazy, right? But those murders in Powhatan Mill, when I walked into that room, my heart went cold. My hands numbed. I could feel it.
Feel what, Frank?
When I first heard about the death camps in 1945, I remembered Powhatan Mill. When I see the Kurds and the Bosnians, that room is there, I tell you. It's like all the horrible acts that humans are capable of somehow gave birth to some kind of human monster. That's why I say I've been waiting for you. There's a box in the trunk here. Get it for me, would you please?
By the way, I also like how he has such a great memory of something that he hasn't even looked at in 25 years.
I do love the bit where he's like, I've been waiting for you. I've been waiting for somebody else to get in on this. Like, just one crazy person waiting for another one.
Yeah.
And it's been 30 years, so we knew it was going to happen again.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some things that happened 25 years ago that I remember pretty clearly. Probably, not perfectly, but there's a lot of high school that I can recall.
Yeah, okay. That's fair. 9/11.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
Colton is furious that they're still investigating this, and he threatens them. So I guess the interagency drama continues where Mulder and Scully think that, well, this is an X-file, or Mulder's justification is like, I've had this file longer than he has. I've had folders about a serial killer in Baltimore for going on for years. So they continue the investigation. Meanwhile, Colton is trying to go above their head and threaten, I guess, call their supervisor and get them in trouble, which is, I guess, fairly realistic just because it's normal interagency drama where you have, a coworker at a different agency trying to fuck with you because you're doing your thing.
Sure.
Oh, and at a certain point, Tooms becomes fascinated with Scully. One of the details that the older detective, what was the older detective's name? Retired Detective Frank Briggs. So they discover Frank Briggs. One of his useful bits of information is that Tooms would take a little trophy from each of his victims, which I'm not really sure, doesn't quite make sense how he figured that out. He just says, things were missing from their houses.
Yeah, because part of his mutation is he sort of nests.
Yep.
Yeah.
So at some point, he takes it. At some point, they discover his little nest. And while investigating it, it's disgusting. And they do a good job of making it look really gross and describing it smelling like bile.
Yeah, just thinking about, okay, they stumble across this nest, which is he makes it's kind of like he's making almost paper mache using bodily fluids, which, by the way, if they have the stuff from, well, maybe it's not well preserved, but DNA analysis of that would be pretty straightforward. So
yeah,
I would think.
Also, it doesn't make sense that it's been his apartment for 60 years.
Sure.
At some point, something would happen. But while they're investigating it, Tooms is also there, hiding in the shadows, and I guess he pulls a little... What did he pull off Scully? A little brooch off of her or something, or some hair? He took some trophy from Scully.
I think it was it was her necklace, right?
It was a necklace, okay. So while they're investigating, Tooms is hiding there, and he steals Scully's necklace. And then later in the episode, sneaks into her house and tries to kill her.
Which, by the way, is what they get him on. They don't get him in the episode on these murders that he's been committing.
Which doesn't make any sense. You would think that would be a really great, really easy way to tie him to all of the other murders.
Except that that expects people to buy that he's been doing this for 100 years.
All right, so it should be very easy to tie him to the other murders that happened in the last year.
Oh.
Because he's in a building where somebody else dies. They then find him at Scully's place trying to kill him. He was already a suspect. It seemed his only defense is the lie detector test.
Yeah, and we'll get to what his excuse was for attacking Scully in a little bit.
Yeah, so at the end of the episode, he's staring longingly at the slot in the door, planning his escape.
Well, but see, I'm coming back to again. I don't know that he has a need to fit into small spaces. It's that would be his means of escape.
Yeah,
so
but
that's
then
what
he
he's
also makes
on.
But he also makes a nest in small spaces. He makes a nest in little crawl spaces.
Fair enough.
From these two episodes, this is my understanding of this character. But that is the end of the first episode. The second episode opens up. I think it opens up right away with the hearing about if he should be allowed out.
There's a couple of little bits in front of that, but he's in the process of trying to escape when his doctor shows up, so he abandons the attempt. And then Scully's being accosted for being too supportive of Mulder by the cigarette smoking man.
It's the psychologist. So yeah.
And that, I don't think that's the very first appearance of the cigarette smoking man, but for those who don't know, the cigarette smoking man is a recurring character who's a higher up in the government, who is sometimes an obstacle, sometimes an ally of the the X-Files group. Who played the cigarette smoking man?
Oh, I used to know his name, but I don't anymore.
William B. Davis. Yeah, so he and I think he dies in the X-Files at some point, but interesting character who made some appearances earlier in the season, but now is also a little bit more featured as the first season goes on. But yeah, Scully's being accosted for being too close with Mulder or too helpful to him, I guess. And then we go into, is it a parole board meeting or is it a psychological hearing? It's not quite clear.
By order of the state of Maryland, the court shall review the psychological status of Eugene Victor Tooms. We'll begin with the court-appointed expert witnesses. The court calls Dr. Pamela Koretsky.
It is absolutely not made clear, and it doesn't fit either.
Well, because for the record, it starts off as the court is being called to order.
Right, in a mental health facility.
Correct.
Yep. Yeah. Which, I mean, courts do sometimes, for various reasons, have to convene not in a courtroom. That happens.
Okay. I mean, typically that doesn't have three people sitting on a bench in front of you, but what do I know?
No, not generally. And as we'll get to, if this is a mental health hearing, it would be in front of a judge, not a panel. And there's no reason he couldn't go to the courtroom to do that. So I want to talk a bit about like parole hearings versus whatever this is, and maybe a mental health involuntary commitment hearing. I have a little bit, just by way of background, I have handled a few cases now involving people either seeking parole or out on parole. And so I want to say I have some knowledge of the process, but it varies wildly from state to state. And also, I am not a criminal attorney, so if I get anything in this wrong, mea culpa. And please, if I do get something wrong, and and you are someone who practices in this area, reach out to us and let us know. We're happy to learn. So this is, like Derrick said, essentially a panel of three people. I presume at least one is a judge, who are taking testimony in a hearing from Tooms's doctors and also from Mulder. And let me just start by saying that Agent Fox Mulder is the worst witness you can possibly imagine.
Mr. Mulder, as an expert witness for the state of Maryland, can you list your qualifications?
I'm a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I worked for 3 years at the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit, profiling serial killers.
Your Honor, I know where he's going with this. May I remind the court that Mr. Tooms was placed in psychiatric care solely for the previous assault on Agent Scully. He has never been charged, nor has any evidence linked him to any other crime.
You may proceed with caution.
Agent Mulder, I understand that you've drawn upon your experience and developed a profile on Mr. Tooms.
Yes, I have.
Please.
These murders span nearly a century. 19 homicides, 5 occurring every 30 years since 1903, all in the Baltimore area. In each case, the liver was extracted and presumably eaten. A trophy was taken from each victim, many of which were found in the living quarters of Eugene Tooms at 66 Exeter Street. Records show that a Eugene Tooms has resided at that same address since 1903, the same year a man was murdered in that building. Besides the liver extraction, the most notable element connecting these cases is the undetermined point of entry. Many of the victims were found with their windows and doors locked from the inside. These elongated fingerprints found at 7 of the 19 crime scenes match Eugene Victor Tooms.
Agent Mulder, look at his fingers. Look at him, 100 years
I
old.
contend that perhaps through a genetic mutation, Eugene Tooms is capable of contorting and elongating his body in order to gain access to victims, so that he may extract the livers which provide him sustenance for the hibernation period of 30 years. He needs one more victim to complete this cycle.
Your Honor.
A preliminary exam done at the time of Toombs' arrest revealed abnormalities in his striated muscles and axial bones. His attorney blocked further study.
Thank you, Agent Mulder.
I ask you to place the safety of the
Counsel?
people
No
first and
further
foremost.
questions, Your
This
Honor.
is a rare
Agent
and abnormal
Mulder.
human creature who should
Agent
not be
Mulder.
released, but retained for further study.
You may step down.
If you release Eugene Toombs, he will kill again. It's in his genetic makeup.
In a hearing, like by the end of it, you think he should be the one who's involuntarily committed.
The most realistic part of the entire show is that everyone thinks he's crazy.
Yeah. But they have Toombs's doctor and a number of other mental health experts speaking, saying Toombs has learned to articulate his feelings and things like that, as well as one specialist did a number of tests on him that all came back negative. And as a result of this testimony, they find that he should be released. And they have a few conditions. He is supposed to continue receiving therapy from his psychiatrist. He is supposed to go live with a couple who apparently provide sort of transitional services for people coming out of this health facility. A lot of things that sound like conditions for parole, but this is not a parole hearing. Because, well, for a bunch of different reasons. First off, let's start by talking about what he was presumably convicted of. They never say it outright. They do say, they indicate that the only thing he's been convicted of is assaulting Scully in her house, and in a way that would seem to me to be attempted murder. Regardless, assaulting a federal officer is a crime punishable by up to 8 years in prison. Attempted murder of a federal officer has a sentence of up to 20 years. He has only been in treatment for, I believe they say something like a year and a half. So if this is a parole hearing, it's far too early. Parole does not happen when you're only a year into what is likely something like a 20-year sentence. So that leads me to think, okay, this is a mental health hearing. And there's a few different circumstances in which that can arise. One is if you're indicted for a crime, but because of your mental health, you are not competent to assist your attorney in your defense, then the case can't move forward until you are able to do that. And in the interim, you are involuntarily committed for treatment to hopefully, if they can, bring you to the point where you are able to assist your attorney in your trial. That doesn't appear to be what is happening here. He is not subject to trial after he's released. He is not he's not assisting his attorney in any way. It seems he has been adjudicated in some way for assaulting Scully. What were you going to say, Mike?
Well, this is a common trope that gets brought up too often in movies, and it's maybe a misconception the public has that, oh, the insanity defense gets you get off the crime because you were crazy.
I'm going to
really, yeah.
I am definitely going to get to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Not to say your thunder, but this is a misconception that everybody has, and this show is just promoting that.
Right. Yeah. So since this does not appear to be a situation where he needs to be competent to stand trial, he has been tried for something, it seems. Either two options are available. Either he was found not guilty by reason of insanity, or NGBI, or he was found guilty but mentally incompetent or mentally ill. And in both situations, and which one is available or whether both are available, it varies from state to state again. But regardless, in either situation, if a jury finds that you are either not guilty by reason of insanity or guilty but mentally ill, you are not set free. In the vast majority of cases, you are involuntarily committed for treatment for whatever caused you to, whatever mental illness resulted in you committing whatever act you were charged with. And over the years, how we decide whether or not someone is insane or mentally ill has changed significantly. Going back to our initial rules, and in some jurisdictions, perhaps many jurisdictions in the U.S., we draw from the so-called McNaughton rule from the UK in the mid-1800s. And what that rule said is that to establish, I'm quoting here, to establish a defense on the ground of insanity, it must be clearly proved that at the time of the committing of the act, the party accused was laboring under such a defect of reason from disease of the mind as not to know the nature and quality of the act he was doing, or if he did know it, that he did not know what he was doing was wrong. That he did not know he was doing what was wrong. And in many jurisdictions, this remains the case, that if you did not know that your action was morally wrong for reason of some sort of mental illness, then you can be found either, not guilty by reason of insanity or guilty but mentally ill. This, for a time, was supplanted in the United States, starting for a brief period from like the mid-1950s to the 60s. There was a case out of the D.C. Circuit Court called Durham v. United States that broadened the definition of essentially mentally incompetent. To be an accused is not criminally responsible if his unlawful act was the product of mental disease or mental defect. In essence, if you had a mental illness but for that illness you would not have committed the crime, therefore you are, we'll say, not guilty for reason of insanity, so I don't keep repeating the two alternate ways. That didn't last very long. It was quickly replaced by what's referred to as the Model Penal Code, or ALI, American Legal Institute rule. For those of you who don't know, the Model Penal Code is the American Law Institute's essentially proposed elements of most, if not all, criminal acts. The American Law Institute, whenever it's talking about anything, it is attempting to both crystallize what is the current state of the law throughout the United States, and also make adjustments where the legal community thinks it is appropriate, to both sort of solidify the law and make it more consistent, and also advance it in specific ways. Anyway, so the Model Penal Code has two elements for the insanity defense. First, a person is not responsible for criminal conduct if at the time of such conduct, as a result of mental illness or defect, he lacks substantial capacity either to appreciate the criminality of his conduct or to conform his conduct to the requirements of the law. And second, the term mental disease or defect does not include, I shouldn't have said it has two elements. It has, that means something very specific to lawyers. There are two parts to the ALI rule. The second part is that as used in this rule, mental disease or defect does not include an abnormality manifested only by repeated criminal or otherwise antisocial conduct. So you can interpret that in a number of different ways. It's not, you can't use it to get away with a DUI, for example. Your mental impairment as a result of intoxication is not a defense. And that became the rule for a little while, until John Hinckley shot President Reagan. And he was adjudicated and found not guilty for reason of insanity. people didn't like that, and so they replaced the ALI rule with the Insanity Defense Reform Act, which essentially reestablishes the McNaughton rule. It says, in essence, a person can raise an insanity defense if, at the time of the commission of the acts constituting the offense, as the result of a severe mental illness or defect, they were unable to appreciate the nature and quality or wrongfulness of their acts. So they didn't know what they were doing was wrong. Now, I lay all this out with some specificity because I want to talk about the testimony that's given by the people in this hearing.
I performed several diagnostic procedures on Mr. Tooms in order to determine any organic physiological dysfunction. An electroencephalogram, chromosomal analysis, a computerized axial tomograph. All of these were negative.
Mr. Tooms had recently lost his job. Parenthesis, Baltimore Animal Regulation / dog catcher, close parenthesis. Aggravated by a false arrest incident with the FBI. His assault on Agent Scully was, quote, frustration directed at the wrong person, end quote.
I'm reading from a recent interview I did with Mr. Tooms at the Druid Hill Sanitarium. Question. If you were released, what is the first thing you would do? Answer. I'd like my old job back. Question. Why? Answer. The animal shelter made me feel I was helping everyone, people and animals. So you see what is occurring here is that Mr. Tooms has learned to articulate his feelings and invest his emotional energy and creative energy.
None of it pertains to whether or not he can tell the difference between right or wrong. He can articulate his condition or his desires, is what one of the people says, and we'll drop that quote in here. And whatever mental deficiencies one of the experts was testing him for he was found to be negative in those tests, meaning he didn't have whatever deficiencies those were. None of those, nor Mulder's testimony, which is about, he's been killing people for 100 years now, and if he's allowed to go free, he will kill again in 30 years. That doesn't have anything to do with whether or not he can tell the difference between right and wrong now either. None of this pertains to whether or not he should be released from this mental health facility. Which is why I don't know. I don't know whether this is supposed to be a parole hearing and he has reformed or a mental health hearing. It's not either. And I mean, the show doesn't really care. It's just a hearing and he gets out. He needed a reason for him to get out.
My issue with it is both that the insanity defense doesn't make any sense, but also doesn't deal with any of the other crimes that they would have gone after him for. But
right.
I guess we're just ignoring that.
What the show does get right is that when you are either guilty by reason of insanity or guilty but mentally ill, you don't get off for doing the crime. You are then involuntarily committed for an indeterminate amount of time until your mental health professionals find that you are no longer suffering from whatever condition caused you to not know the difference between right and wrong in the first place. And in many cases that can be longer, especially when a lot of these things are not really something that can be, I hesitate to use the word cured, but plenty of things. I'm trying to walk a fine line between, we don't want to demonize mental illness broadly, but also a lot of the illnesses that might cause someone to be violent and not know the difference between right and wrong aren't things that are easily fixed. But though that subset of mental illness is vanishingly small. And I want to be clear that this is not everyone who suffers from a mental illness, hardly anybody who suffers from a mental illness is not going to know the difference between right and wrong. So I'm trying to walk a fine line here.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And actually, one thing I wanted to bring up, Geoff, is like you had mentioned that the Insanity Defense Reform Act, which was 1984, like they also brought in that it isn't just necessarily that the defendant has to show this. They have to prove it by clear and convincing evidence, right? Like, that was also part of the act.
Oh, yeah.
Was that it even requires a higher burden than just more than the other side. So, like, so the fact that they brought in practically no evidence of what they actually were supposed to show means that they clearly did not meet the higher burden of clear and convincing evidence. Also, to quickly go back to, like, was this a parole hearing or was this a mental health hearing? Parole hearings are scheduled, right? Like, there is usually under state law, it is like you get a parole hearing at this point. So if you're sentenced to 5 to 15 years, at 5 years you're given a parole hearing, which is scheduled, and you're going to find out when it was scheduled. You're not going to one day have a psychiatrist show up to your cell or whatever we're going to call it and go, hey, you get to go in front of the board tomorrow. Like, that's not going to happen. So I think this has to be a mental health hearing, but like you said, it doesn't make any sense to be a mental health hearing.
Yeah. And in the case I've had that has gone through completion, the incarcerated individual that I was representing knew 6 months to a year in advance when his parole hearings were going to be,
right.
Which was important because we needed to know that in order to show we need to change these conditions. In that instance, the question was the conditions that would make him even eligible for parole imposed religion on him, essentially, because that's my job. And those conditions, before he could even get to the parole board at all, needed to be cleared beforehand. So we had to move pretty quickly. Anyway, that is a long way of saying, yes, you are exactly correct.
So somehow this is a hybrid mental health hearing / let's show how weird and crazy Mulder is. Yeah,
well, I don't even want to say it's hybrid because it's not enough to be either.
It's just
it is run by a judge, but yes,
presumably.
The character's name is Judge Kern.
Oh, okay.
But who are the other two?
That I have no idea.
So it's Judge Kern and then
Judge Khan.
So
I don't know who the other two are.
So it's Judge Khan and then two humans sitting directly next to the judge, which never happens.
Two human people. Just
right,
two
not corporate people.
Normal human
people.
Human people.
Also, Tooms, totally normal human person.
Apparently.
Sliding through little crevices.
Right.
So they find Tooms. We don't actually know what finding them, but he's innocent now.
Let me just
he's out of jail.
He's released.
Let me just say one more thing. Judges don't sit on parole boards. Parole boards are
Yes.
a completely independent thing.
Yep.
So yeah.
So this judge in charge of the parole board / insanity defense hearing releases him into the custody of, I guess, a halfway house, something like that.
Yeah.
Mulder knows he's going to commit crimes again, so he's dedicated his life to harassing this now innocent man. Just the law, the long arm of the law stretching out and harassing somebody.
Well, I'm going to push back a bit on that.
Yeah.
Specifically on this now innocent man. Because
yes,
if it is, as the show intimates, if they don't I believe they explicitly call it a parole hearing at one point in the episode. However, if you are out on parole, you are subject. Yes, you are still guilty. But at the same time, you are subject to a lot of requirements, and law enforcement has a greater degree of flexibility to sort of invade your life to ensure that you are meeting those requirements. So,
but he's not the parole. Mulder is not the parole officer. When he sees this guy on the street and starts bothering him, he's not acting in any official.
That's true. He's not even a state law enforcement officer. Yeah. So that's fair.
He, as an FBI agent, the show gives him free reign to just do and be wherever he wants. He has no official assignments at any given time, apparently.
Yeah, that is like all U.S. media. An FBI badge gives you carte blanche to do whatever you want.
But also your day-to-day, like, you don't have to be investigating shit, apparently. You can just, like, be outside somebody's house, like, spying on him. He has no other responsibilities at this time. So, what are my tax dollars paying for? Mulder is continuing to investigate this guy. He's splitting his time with Scully because Scully is not allowed to help him too much, or because the B plot is that the higher ups in the FBI are getting tired of Mulder's shit. At some point, Tooms frames Mulder for attacking him, and I forget exactly how, but he gets Mulder's shoe and gets a footprint of Mulder's shoe on him, and then says Mulder did it. And Mulder, being the expert in all things, is able to show, well, there's no foot in that shoe when it left that footprint, which is just like the perfect trope of heroic writing, where this guy is just, he's an expert in everything that could be relevant for the plot.
Yeah.
They revisit Detective Frank Briggs and are able to uncover another murder, and they dig up a body from, I guess it's, where was the body actually? It was, they had to dig up some concrete to find this body.
Yeah, it was like buried in the foundation of a chemical treatment plant or something.
And they find gnaw marks on him that match Toombs's jaw. And then we have her. Eventually, they have a heroic chase where they're. Was he trying to kill Scully again?
I don't remember what brings them to the mall or the I don't know.
I can tell you why they went to the mall. They went to the mall. They went to the mall because that was where his former apartment was, but it had been demolished, and the mall had been put up.
And he's drawn to nest in small places again. Remember that, Geoff?
Right, of course.
Yes. So they're in the mall, and
okay. I mean, he nests in small places. He's in like a space the size of an office cubicle, versus like you're talking before about like an air vent, like a household. You know,
the plot is not consistent with the small places. Small is a relative term in the plot.
That's true. I shouldn't be expecting logical consistency from the X-Files. It's fine.
No, not especially not the first season where the special this. So I will say these two episodes have maybe my favorite effects of the first season. There are some parts in the first season where the special effects of 1993 network television are real bad.
True.
There's some bits where, like, you know, he's having a really intense encounter with an alien, so it goes to black and white.
Sure.
Or it's just still footage.
Tooms has this. We get Tooms' vision at one point where, like, people's skin in certain places turns yellow. I guess if they're high in whatever chemical it is he needs to survive.
Livered chemicals.
Yeah.
But eventually there's an exciting chase, and Tooms gets crushed by an escalator, which is just a fear you didn't know you had until you see this. Overall, I enjoyed the episode. I wouldn't say it was realistic at all, but it's the X-Files, so what do you expect?
Yeah, once I got past the legal proceeding of it all, it's a fun episode.
There's like the things you get out of the X-Files are like cool little mysteries that are sometimes. This is not actually this does have a great example of it. In the first episode, or in episode 3, Mulder will hypothesize about what could be causing this and is right a shocking % of the time, even when it makes absolutely no sense. So it's like, there's very similar murders happening 30 years apart. What if there's a mutant who sleeps underground, who comes out at once every 30 years and commits these murders? Like, that is like the craziest thing. Like, no human being would ever guess that, and then for it to be right is to fit the plot is too perfect.
Right, and it's Mulder's first thought. It isn't House, where he eventually has an epiphany at the end of Act 3.
The show gets better about that, but the first season there's a lot of that where he's like, what if they're all actually werewolves and they turn into wolves and kill each other? And it's like, that would not be my first thought when investigating a murder, but maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Overall, I really enjoyed it, though.
The degree to which the X-Files is responsible for, like, a ton of the problems we have now. It's like the X-Files and the internet happened at roughly the same time.
Yeah. So this is a thing that I've gone back and forth on. You know, should you make TV shows? What is the responsibility of creators when they make something like this that implies there's ancient aliens and things like that? Does that encourage more beliefs in the supernatural, or is the reason it's popular is that belief is already so common?
I mean, I've had the same thoughts in the context of the Indiana Jones series. Like, I with the exception of, I was about to say with the exception of the Temple of Doom, Indiana Jones 1 and 3, I very much enjoy. I am in no way a religious believer and don't, I don't think that either of the things that are shown to be true in those are actually true, but we're in the realm of fiction. Like, I also don't think that Jedi are real or that the Force is a thing. I think it's a human problem rather than a...
You can take it the other way, where Indiana Jones exists in the world where religion actually did happen.
Yeah.
Like, this is a fictional world, so Jesus lived in a fictional world. Yes, Jesus was...
But also the Jews were right with, with Raiders.
On that note, the cigarette smoking man, William B. Davis, was a famous skeptic who would apparently go around giving lectures on skepticism.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I've seen that pop up on Reddit a bunch of times.
I wonder if any of those are recorded. I'd be interested to watch that.
I think he has some YouTube videos. So yeah, I'm looking at some right now.
Hi everyone, Derrick here with a brief message. The Not So Grand Jury is sponsored by my law firm, Moore Law PLLC. One of Moore Law PLLC's many practice areas is business law. If you are a business owner or someone who is thinking of starting up a new or side business, you need a legal team who can efficiently provide you legal counsel, keeping you and your business away from potential legal issues, and if necessary, representing you in any disputes that do arise. We pride ourselves on being cost efficient while also getting to know our clients. If you want less stress and more support, you need Moore Law. If you would like to set up a free consult, please click on the link in the show notes, visit our website, www.mooreatty.com, that's mooreatty.com, or email us at contact@mooreatty.com. And now, back to the show.
Overall, I liked it. I don't know how you guys said you wanted to change the rating system.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk a little bit about that. So regular listeners will know that we generally rate things. Each of us gives 2 ratings, one on just entertainment value and one on legal accuracy. And those ratings are from 0 to 9 justices, representing the 9 justices on the Supreme Court. That's a bit too complicated and inconsistent and frankly a little bit obscure. So I'm wondering if we should shift to I'm proposing that we shift to each of us voting yay or nay on the legal accuracy and yay or nay on the quality, and then at the end we'll have 0 to 3 votes in favor of it for quality and legal accuracy.
Okay, why don't we give it a try here? So
I have a very important question, which is, can you split your own vote?
No. I think no.
So it's either yay or nay. That's really interesting because I feel like that's very binary. Yes.
Yeah.
Let's give it a shot on this one and see how we feel about it, and we can talk about it next week maybe. I'm going to say yay for quality. I enjoyed this show, and the X-Files still hold up reasonably well. There are some random lines that maybe haven't aged as well. Let me throw one of those in there real quick. Maybe we drop this in the very beginning, but Canton, what's the guy's name? Colton. Part of his success is that he lucked into the World Trade Center bombing.
Yeah, that's...
But for the most part, the show has aged pretty well. I enjoy it. I'm still making my way through the original run. So yay for the quality, but nay for the legal aspects. It doesn't really get anything particularly well.
I'll go. I think I'm in agreement. I cannot give this a yay vote in terms of legal accuracy, but I did enjoy it. The X-Files. I enjoy the X-Files overall. It was appointment viewing for my family growing up, but it certainly can be hit or miss. But these episodes I did enjoy. For 1993 television. So yay on quality, nay on legal accuracy.
Okay. Well, I'm going to start this off by saying I hate anything scary. I hate scary movies. And I'm not saying this was like that scary, like, you know, but enough. I mean, like, we're not talking like The Grudge here, like, which I still have nightmares about from 2004 when I watched it in theaters and watched it like this the whole time and occasionally opened up just to then go back, which I'm not even sure why I was in the movie theater. Thank you to my friends Matt and Tara to bringing me that and ruining certain aspects of my childhood. But for X-Files, like, listen, this wasn't tremendously scary. I did not love it though.
Sure.
It's not my thing. I'm not a big fan. I'm now we can talk about whether in the future this is going to be a situation where if two people say yay but it wasn't that great, do we give it a like conciliatory no so that it's a 2-1 split rather than a 3-0? That's not a worry here. It's just a no for me. So I'm not even, this isn't even a conciliatory no. This is just a straight up, I wasn't a fan. Were there aspects that are funny? Absolutely. Like, certain parts were great. There were some great lines in it. I do think that...
There's some, like, very good writing, and then there's occasionally moments where, like, it's the first season and the writing is terrible. Like, the very beginning of the show has, like, some great... Vincent Adultman is the character from BoJack Horseman, where he's, like, somebody pretending to do business, and, like, the very first scene of that episode, where he's like, oh, yeah, I did a lot of business at the Wall Street today. Sold a business. It was great. Like, it was just terrible.
Yeah. I mean, like, listen, like, what I will say is, I actually don't think it's terribly badly acted.
No.
Like, I actually think, like, the acting is pretty good. I think Doug Hutchinson loves to play slimy characters. Like, he is very good at that.
I didn't think to look, is he in other things? Well, he must be in other things. Is he in other things that I would recognize?
I think the one thing you would recognize, and I'm looking it up to confirm right now, is the guard Percy in The Green Mile.
Oh, yeah. Man, you said that and like suddenly, yeah, that's exactly who it is.
Which, funny enough, when I first saw his face when he comes out of the ductwork, that was the first thought I had in my mind, was like, isn't this a guard somewhere? Like, so it's always funny when like you see a character that is kind of known for one or two smaller roles, and you're like, I can't get my brain wrapped around that he's this character. But I do think he plays the character very well, and I agree with Mike. The writing is hilariously bad at times, but very good at other times. So it's a no for me. On the legal stuff, it's certainly a no. Like, I'm actually not sure when it gets right on the law, other than like I think Geoff had said the only thing it gets right is that even if he was not guilty by insanity or whatever, you don't just aren't released. Like, you are still put into some type of mental health facility or sanatorium or whatever we're calling it in 1993. But that is about it.
There's a line I forgot to mention earlier. There's a line where Mulder's like, I made my parents call me Mulder, and that is a good line.
Like there's some really good writing and there's some really good acting in it, but that does not save it. So I am in the no for both, which I believe gives it a 2. So we're in a split bench 2-1 on the enjoyment, and we are in the just straight up 0-3, like nothing.
We're unanimously overturning this on legal grounds.
Correct. So we're just overturning it, and we're shooting it back to the trial court and saying, try again. Or we're maybe even overturning the trial court and saying, you were wrong. We're actually just going to rule the other way. The Not So Grand Jury is sponsored by Morwa P. LLC.
The opinions expressed in the Not So Grand Jury are those of the hosts themselves and not of their respective employers.
The theme music for the Not So Grand Jury is from Gustav Holst's Jupiter and is in the public domain.
If you'd like to get in touch with us, if you want to suggest future movies, or even if you want to offer corrections, you can email us at notsograndjury@gmail.com or message us on any of our social media accounts.
The Not So Grand Jury is copyright 2025, all rights reserved.